Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. We're excited to announce this one-of-a-kind clinical trial finder for cholangiocarcinoma patients. This program has been developed by one of our trusted partners, CCF, in conjunction with Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation, members of our Scientific and Medical Advisory Board, and patients. This has truly been a collaborative community effort. I want to take just a moment to share with you our concept of a trusted partner. Companies approach the foundation every single day, and usually they want our help or they want your health information. I want you to know that we do not share your personal information with any of these companies. Most of the companies that approach us, you will never hear about because we will not be partnering with them. CCF will only partner with companies who meet very specific criteria. First, they're aligned with our core values, which are patients first, collaboration, urgency, and innovation. Second, we have a trusting relationship. There's integrity at the core of that relationship. Third, we have experience with them, which means we know the kind of quality work that they do. And this has been an over 1 year relationship that we've had with CCF. Fourth, they have complementary strengths, meaning that our work together is a natural multiplier. And fifth, they share our passion. CCF has met these criteria, and we are very happy to have them as a trusted partner. They've developed an outstanding product with you in mind. Access to clinical trials is important for all cancer patients, but it is very important for cholangiocarcinoma patients because it's more than just a treatment option. It's part of your ongoing treatment plan. This tool will simplify your pathway to participating in clinical trials, no matter where you are being treated. During the webinar today, there will be some poll questions that will come up on the screen at various times. Please take a second to answer these questions. It's quick, easy, and your answers are anonymous. But it does help us learn more about you, how we can better serve and assist you. There will be time for questions after the presentation, and you can submit your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. And again, we want to thank you for being here with us today. So I want to just briefly introduce our presenters. Today, that will be Martin Naley and Sophia Cornew from CCF. They will be joined by Melinda Bachini. Martin runs the clinical trial informatics program at CCF and previously led, led the Biden Cancer Initiative's clinical trials acceleration program. Martin brings a robust and diverse background spanning molecular biology, life technologies, and as the founder of a company that helped patients obtain and use their genomic test results in their fight against cancer. While at the Biden Cancer Initiative, he launched a program called the Oncology Clinical Trial Information Commons, which was a cross-sector consortium effort to create a harmonized structured knowledge base about cancer trials for the purpose of clinical trial matching. That was a little bit of a mouthful. When BCI closed its operations in 2019, as Joe Biden began his presidential run, Martin joined the CCF team where he has led the development of a clinical trial matching system that he and Sophia are presenting today. Sophia leads CCF's partnership team, bringing together nonprofits and advocacy organizations, health systems, and industry to better serve patients. Sophia's experience brings together a diverse understanding of the healthcare ecosystem and financial markets. Her focus at CCF is on creating a robust network of partners across the nonprofit and commercial space, capable of together creating new structural approaches to patient-driven research. In addition, she oversees the implementation of CCF's clinical trial matching program. And as I mentioned before, they'll be joined by Melinda Bachini, an 11-year survivor of metastatic cholangiocarcinoma and the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation's Director of Advocacy. So we want to welcome them today.
Thanks, Stacy. Again, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today. We are going to be going through this presentation and talking about the clinical trial finder, but we want you to know that we're going to make it interactive. So if you do have questions along the way, don't hesitate to put your questions in the Q&A or the chat box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll try to get to them right away so that we can continue the conversation. Go ahead, Sophia, next slide. I'm just going to talk a little bit about my clinical trial experience. Like Stacy said, I was diagnosed almost 11 years ago. I've had a resection, recurrence 3 months after my resection to my lungs. I've done 18 months of 3 different types of chemo regimens, and I even came to the decision to stop treatment altogether. But ultimately, I stumbled upon a clinical trial on my own. My initial thought when I was diagnosed was that I needed to find a clinical trial because what was out there wasn't going to cure me. I was 41, I had 6 children, and I knew that I wanted to try to find a way to have a chance to live longer than the 6 months to a year that they had given me. So like I said, I did the chemo and all of that. My initial oncologist was very proactive, and he was willing to look for clinical trials with me first line, which was great, and he found one. But unfortunately, the time frame 10 years ago, my insurance company would not cover the standard of care costs that went into that clinical trial, and I wasn't willing to put my family in financial stress to enter into clinical trial at the time. At that time, as a patient, I didn't even know that was possible. So there's all these different aspects that go into participating in a clinical trial, even though you want to and are willing and are looking. After that, and when my reoccurrence came, there weren't any available clinical trials at the time 10 years ago. And so now I'm happy to say at this time, there are all sorts of clinical trials available for cholangiocarcinoma patients. Ultimately, I found this clinical trial, I took it to my oncologist, and it's a clinical trial that would have never been on their radar. And it was adoptive T-cell therapy at the National Cancer Institute with Dr. Steven Rosenberg, and I was the first patient to have a response. But the reason that this clinical trial jumped out at me is because I had already exhausted so many chemo efforts and I didn't want to do chemo anymore. But because this was an immunotherapy trial, I remember looking at my husband and saying, I think we can try this. I think I can give this a shot. And at that time, we had absolutely nothing to lose and everything to gain. And so we called out to the NCI on our own, got the information. Everything was sent to us. My husband's an RN. I remember we were sitting at the kitchen table. He drew my blood. We sent in the information. We took this to our local oncologist and said, you know, this is what we want to do. And I remember him saying, you know, I'll support you in whatever you want to do. But typically we work with the university out of Denver, you know, which is great because I'm from Montana and that's where, you know, it's convenient. And I said, no, this is really what I want to do. And so I'm just so grateful that I did because I was the first one to respond. And yes, 11 years later, I'm here to talk about it. But I really just want to emphasize that I think it's difficult for all doctors to be able to search all the available clinical trials and bring those options to you. I think as patients and caregivers and advocates of our own health, that we have to do our part and find the tools and the ways, you know, to bring those options available, take them to our physicians, have those conversations with them and ask them, is this an option for me? Is this something that I can try? And I tell patients every day as I'm talking to them that it never hurts to gather information, to make the phone calls to the clinical trials, to the second opinion doctors, give them all the information there is, you gather it, you look it over, and then you get to make that educated decision of what route you want to go. So anyway, I do think clinical trials are important. Go ahead, next slide. Obviously, clinical trials have saved my life. I'm here 11 years later to talk about it. Clinical trials in the cholangiocarcinoma community, they're an essential part, clinical trials are an essential part of the treatment plan for cholangiocarcinoma. We have no proven treatment that's going to cure us, and the only way to get that proven treatment is to participate in clinical trials. And the only hope to expand our chances of surviving a longer time are to enter into clinical trials. So it's a valid and very important part of the treatment plan for most patients, especially as patients who are metastatic and don't qualify for surgery. A recent large study across all cancer types showed those on a clinical trial versus not on a clinical trial had superior overall survival at 5 years and at 7 years. And then we did a study with over 1,000 pancreatic and cholangiocarcinoma patients in 2019. And out of those, 354 cholangiocarcinoma responders said that more than 90% of them are willing to participate in a clinical trial. So the most important thing is that we just need to have access and the ability to be able to participate into those trials. And as of this year, there are over 147 open trials available for cholangiocarcinoma patients and growing. And I don't even think that includes all the ones that, I think it does include some solid tumors, but I think that number could even be expanded even more. Next slide. So access to clinical trials can save lives, but despite strong interest from patients and a quickly expanding set of open clinical trials, finding the right one for you remains extremely difficult. It's hard to know what trials are an option for you. Patients struggle every day. I get calls every day and I'm asked to help patients navigate how to find a clinical trial. You know, how do they search them? Where do they look? If it's not available at the institution that they're being cared for, can they travel somewhere else? And one of the biggest questions is, in what order do I go? You know, there's 147 trials to choose from. So if I choose one first, what does that eliminate for me second and third? There may not be trials available to you where you receive care, but that doesn't mean that you wouldn't be eligible to participate in one if you are willing to travel, or it just depends on the circumstance, because every trial is different. But just because they're not available in your institution doesn't mean you shouldn't check into it and ask the questions. Your doctor may or may not suggest clinical trials as an option. And as I said before, there is no doctor available that has the time to be able to put into searching all these clinical trials for every single patient. I think the ones that are very much involved in the research and the clinical trials know which ones to be looking for. But I think most of us patients who are diagnosed in community oncology settings, they're not going to know that. So it's really important to bring the tools to them and ask the questions to them. There's definitely a lot of information to learn and wade through, and the unknowns of a trial can be scary. There's a lot of, I guess, preconceptions of what a clinical trial is. Am I going to be experimented on? Is it going to be safe? What are the steps that takes? Does this mean that I'm going to die? There's so many just preconceptions that go along with participating in clinical trials. And the bottom line is, I think the majority of the time when you enter into a clinical trial, you are watched more closely, you're monitored more closely, and I feel like the care that you get in a clinical trial is definitely top notch. I think we're going to do a poll question here. Rick, can we do poll question number 1? So has your healthcare provider discussed clinical trials with you or your loved one? Go ahead and answer yes or no, and we will we'll check the results out right away.
Okay, we have about 70% of people have answered. Let's give it another 5 seconds.
Okay. So yes, 58% of the audience has said that their healthcare provider discussed clinical trials with you or your loved ones. I'm a little sad to see that 42% haven't, but I'm going to hope that's because everyone's had surgery on that spectrum. Next slide. All right, we're going to stop there. But I think I want to do one more poll question, Sophia, if that's okay. Will you do number 2, Rick? So go ahead and answer. Have you or your loved one ever participated in a clinical trial?
Okay, let's do another 5 seconds.
Perfect. So 21% of the audience has participated in a clinical trial and 79% have not. Well, for all of you, I hope that hope we can increase that participation level after the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Sophia.
Thank you, Melinda, for sharing your experience so candidly and honestly. I think in many regards, your experience is an exception, and we hope that that changes because we're building technology and tools to make it even easier for patients to access the options and care that you so valiantly sought out. but it shouldn't take those heroics and that incredible amount of self-advocacy. And so I think that's where Ciitizen and our partnership with CCF is building these tools. So Martin and I, we cannot wait to kind of show you what we've been building and is now available. But before we dive into that, I want to just provide a few very quick overview slides on what a clinical trial even is for those who are less familiar. All of these resources are on the cholangiocarcinoma website. And so, when we talk about what a clinical trial is, when we click to this next slide around what's the difference between first line and beyond first line therapy, we get asked a lot, are clinical trials a viable first line of treatment when you're diagnosed? The answer is yes. Obviously, it depends person to person, but understanding the difference between lines of therapy. There's also different types of treatment. Chemotherapy, targeted therapy. Melinda, you mentioned that you were on an immunotherapy trial that's different than radiation and maybe even other novel therapies. So one of the things that we filter by is the type of therapy that the trial is investigating. Lastly, there's different phases of clinical trials. Phase 1 is really looking at dosing and toxicity, which is really different than phase 2 or phase 3 trial where they're evaluating the efficacy of a treatment for patients, and then phase 3 really scaling that. So again, lots more information on the CCF website if you're new to clinical trials that I would encourage everyone to check out. So clinical trial access. We've learned about Melinda's experience, and here Martin is going to share some data around what is the state of the world when it comes to clinical trials. And I'll steal the thunder from his presentation, but there is a better way. And we are really proud to be working in close partnership with the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation to build tools and technology and access so that we can build this better way together. So I'm going to hand it over to Martin, who's going to share some data and some background with you all.
All right. So it's really exciting to be here with you. That metric that we saw in the first polling question, that 42% of patients haven't spoken with their doctor about clinical trials, it tells me that this is a conversation we need to have. There was a slide just shown about the different phases of clinical trials and how phase 1 is really assessing safety. Well, it's important to note that phase 1 is the new phase 3. And these drugs are so well developed in the research lab that by the time they get to phase 1, they often have a lot of specific knowledge around who might be able to benefit from that drug, and response rates can be extraordinarily high even in phase 1 clinical trials. The other thing is that they're not a last-ditch option. They're relevant at every step of your cancer care. And in fact, you can get blocked out of trials by choosing something else first. Like Melinda was saying, it's a bit of a chess game. So you need to be looking at those clinical trials every step. Now, 76% of cancer patients, when asked, agree that trials would afford them access to new innovative treatments. And in fact, somewhere between 20 and 40% of patients in community settings are eligible for trials. Now, just at face value, when you compare them against the trials in the landscape, there is one available to 20 to 40% of patients, but only 8% enroll today. Now, that's an improvement. A few years ago, it was 3 to 5%, and I'm happy that people have become more aware of clinical trials. But that distance between 8% and 20 to 40% means that there's room for improvement by up to 400%. So for every one person who's enrolling in a trial, there could be 4 more. Wow. And so when you think about that, now 50% of eligible patients, when asked to enroll in clinical trials, agree to. People want this. However, and at the same time, clinical trials are desperate to find these patients. 20% of clinical trials fail to reach their completion just because they can't find enough patients. Isn't that crazy? Now, if you look over on the right-hand side of this slide, this is especially acute in minority populations. And so, here's some numbers that just shocked me. African Americans make up 12% of the US population, but they're only 5% of the clinical trial participants. And it's even worse in the Hispanic population, where 16% of the US population is Hispanic by origin, and only 1% is participating in clinical, or 1% of the clinical trial participants are Hispanic origin. And so that tells you that those groups are especially poorly served. And any solution that we bring to bear through this organization with other organizations has to address that inequity. We just think in this moment in our lives with what's happening in our world, we need to be especially sensitive to that and in fact overachieve for those populations. It's our responsibility to them. Let's go to the next page. All right, so when you're diagnosed with cancer, you guys have been through this. You're introduced to a whole new word salad, which is what I call it. Words like cholangiocarcinoma, you probably never heard that word until you got diagnosed. And things like cisplatin, ECOG, vinblastine, what are these things? All right, well, you're trying to navigate in this, new language, and then you decide you want to go for a clinical trial, and you realize that the clinical trials that are listed on the National Registry, let's go back, National Registry is a completely different language. They may say things like minimum of 2 lines or patients with a PD-1 antibody. What the heck is that? And so, as a patient, it's really hard to try to identify a trial that could be relevant for you. But the fact is, it's not just the patients. Computers can't read it either, because I'll tell you, I spend more than half of every day reading clinical trials on clinicaltrials.gov. They're all riddles. I have 2 other people working with me full time on this, and every text message between us is riddle me this, riddle me that, because we can't read them. And so if we can't read them, who can? This is it's our career, and it's too hard for us. So we want to make it readable for everybody. This is a challenging problem. We decided it's time to solve it. So let's go to the next page. Now, this is the moment we're living in. I talked about kind of Black Lives Matter and minority populations. I think there's another dimension of the time we're living in, which is the pandemic. Now, we got to put that on the table. It's a big factor right now. Some of you have probably put off some part of your care because of COVID. It's scary to go to the hospital right now. This is a weird time, and you're not alone. Hospitals haven't been the same during the pandemic, and it's hurting research too. 60% of trial sites in the United States were recruiting at diminished levels during the pandemic, and 20% stopped recruiting entirely. But the good news is that research is coming back, and these trials are eager to find patients. Now, we want to put the tools in your hands so that you can find those trials that are looking for you. All right, next page. So what we do is we take all that information that's in your medical records and your genomic reports and so on, and we put that into a standardized cancer profile that we call a cancer card on our website. You can look at that anytime. And then what we do is there's 3 steps that happen fully automated behind the scenes. You never have to pay attention to it. It just happens by itself. In fact, it happens every night for every patient on our platform, for thousands of patients. What we do is we translate that patient's medical record into clinical trial language, that word salad on the right. So as a result of that, every patient gets displayed in our system to ourselves as a patient eligibility card. That's kind of like your medical record, except it's a list of the things that would make you eligible for a clinical trial. Just a different way of seeing the same person. It's like a prism. You're just running the person through the prism and you see them in a different light. And so then what we do is we have this knowledge base, this thing that I all day long I read clinical trials with my colleagues. We've been building up a repertoire of all of the clinical trials in the United States, industry-led, academic institution-led, cooperative group-led, and so on, so that we have zero bias. And we run every patient's eligibility card against that clinical trials knowledge base every night to generate a new report, which means every day, if you log on to Ciitizen, you could have a new report. Now, the database doesn't change every day, but we're constantly mining it for new trials. All right, so that report, which is miniaturized on the right, we're going to get into a little bit of what's there. Let's go to the next page. All right, so a lot of people talk about clinical trial matching. I want to show you this slide, even though it's probably a little bit more technical than most people ever think about, to show you what a high fidelity match actually looks at. It's not just your age and gender. Like that's kind of, and the city you live in, those are table stakes. On top of those things, we look at your detailed cancer diagnosis, including your histological type, your stage, your grade, the disease progression status, which is, it sounds easy, but it's actually very hard to compute kind of where you are on the progression spectrum right now. The treatment setting that you're in, some other observations like is your tumor resectable, a performance status, you might have heard things like a ECOG score or Karnofsky score, or a Zubrod score. There's all these scores. They actually all mean the same thing. They're just, again, everyone, whatever language you learned first is the only one you'll ever speak. And these cancer people talk to each other, like right past each other all the time. And so biomarkers, we catalog all your DNA, RNA, and protein biomarkers and use those for matching. We also look at the treatment history for your cancer, including the therapy types you've had, whether it's a certain kind of antibody against a certain target, the number of lines that you've had total and of each kind of treatment, where those treatments happened in terms of, was it before or after surgery or an advanced disease, and then those responses to each line of treatment. We also use prior procedures and medical conditions that could affect your eligibility. Like if you have a heart condition, it's important that those get included in the match process so you don't get introduced to trials that won't want you. Okay, next page.
And Mark, I'd jump in really quickly and say, if you've never seen a lot of these words or don't know the answer, that's okay, because the beauty of Ciitizen is that our technology automatically extracts all of this information, which is already located in your medical records, and does this automatically. Instead of you filling out surveys and having to know the answer to all these things, we're constantly extracting this information from your records as you continue to get care to understand this really high fidelity information to screen you against trials.
Yes. I was just going to jump in and see if we could do the number 3 poll question, because I think that might inform you a little bit more on this. Okay. Go ahead, Rick. Are you currently interested in participating in a clinical trial? Yes or no?
Should we do the music? Do, do, do,
Yeah.
do, do, do.
Almost there. Let's give it another 5 seconds.
Definitely need to cue up the Jeopardy music, yes. Good to see. 76% of the audience are currently interested in participating in a clinical trial. 50% no, and 9% are unsure. Well, maybe by the end, those unsures will be sure. Okay, and then I also want to do the next.
Amazing. 3/4 of people. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just what I'm seeing. I mean, we saw that in our survey, 90% are willing to contribute. We just need to give them the ability and the access to do so. Next question I think would be relevant as well. Have you ever searched for a clinical trial on your own?
All right, let's do another 5 seconds. 5, 4.
Good, 78% have, 22% haven't. And I'm gonna go throw in one more because I think that might answer why. So do the next question, Rick. So is the process of finding a clinical trial for which you or your loved one would qualify, do you find that process intimidating?
5 more seconds.
All right, so what do we got? Yes, almost 90% find it intimidating. And I definitely have to read Stephen West's comment in the Q&A. Oh wait, where did it go? I lost it. He said intimidating, maybe not, but frustrating, definitely. I think it's very relevant.
Definitely relevant. And hopefully I didn't make it more scary by putting all these words up on the slide. And the point of it all is that you don't have to know any of them. You know, we just use them in the background to get you matched at the finest grain level we can to the smallest number of trials possible. I have an anecdote, which is that, you know, in my past, I remember serving a patient and giving them one clinical trial option. And that patient went on Twitter and said, this other place gave me 5 clinical trial options. This guy is terrible. And it was like a bad thing to read on Twitter. So, you know, we looked into it and we realized that that other place gave them 4 trials. It wouldn't help them. They wouldn't qualify for those other 4. So what's the point? You know, it's not a big numbers game. It's the smallest possible, tightest set of clinical trials that could be useful for you is what we want to deliver. All right, next slide. All right, so this is just a quick census of what we have in our database for cholangiocarcinoma patients today. Yeah, the number's 147, and they're divided pretty well across phases. And like I said, don't be afraid of the phase 1s. In fact, there's an advantage of phase 1s, which is there's no control arm. So there's a better chance of getting the new thing. It's just less tested. And so just something to think about. It's a trade-off. And you can also see that there's different kinds of sponsors involved. You know, so about 2/3 of them are industry-led clinical trials for some sort of a new drug in development. And the others are academic trials looking at new combinations of therapies and things like that. Next slide. All right, so let's look at what we did to make this possible. We can skip to the next slide.
Martin, is it time for a drum roll?
Sure, bring it.
I bring the pizzazz and you bring the science. We make a good team.
All right, I will be the boring guy.
No.
All right, next slide. So just as a reminder, you know, so I think Sophia has described what Ciitizen does. Ciitizen takes all of your medical records and genomic test reports, lab reports, things like that, and consolidates them into using very sophisticated, actually, machine learning technology to extract from that medical record kind of the key information that would be useful for identifying the next step in your care and for managing your care. Now, one part of that is finding a clinical trial, but we don't do the extraction just to find clinical trials. We do the extraction to help you understand your data. And in order for that to be effective, there's a set of experts in the company, people who are advanced practice, healthcare providers, who look at every one of these cancer cards and make sure it's all right before we ever publish it to you. That information then comes out to you in the website, and you can share it with whoever you want. Which makes it possible for you to have portable data that enables you to move to new healthcare providers and rapidly enroll in trials. Did I cover that, Sophia? Anything I missed on this slide?
I think the only point to underscore is that the Ciitizen platform is 100% patient controlled. Nothing happens to your data without you explicitly directing consent that you would like it shared, whether that's with CCF, whether that's a researcher, or for clinical trial matching. And so we'll kind of get into the process in which you can request your clinical trial report. But remember that nothing happens in the Ciitizen universe without you saying yes and opting into something explicitly.
A question for you guys. How often is your profile on Ciitizen updated as labs, treatment, et cetera, changes that may change eligibility? And I don't know if you're getting to that later, Martin, or not.
It's a total focus of the presentation later. The short answer is as much as you want it to be. So let's leave it there for now, and then Sophia can describe how.
I'll walk everyone through exactly how to make sure your records are up to date and how to refresh them in case you've gotten new treatments, scans, labs, what have you.
Okay, and I know there's a couple questions in the Q&A box, but I'm going to let you keep going, Martin, and then we'll come back to those.
Okay, thanks, Melinda.
Okay, yep, we'll definitely come back to those questions. All right, so the report, actually, there's no need to really describe all this. You wind up with a report that you can print, that you can take to your doctor's office with you, that shows the specific trials that look like matches for you. The next couple slides, I'm going to describe kind of what's in that report. So let's go there. All right, so there are 4 different match categories. The highest level match is we call a type A match, meaning your medical records align with everything that we know about that trial. All right, so there's nothing missing that we have to worry about. A type B match means that there's something in your record that could change. For instance, maybe you've had 1 line of a certain kind of treatment, but the trial wants 2 lines of chemotherapy before you can enroll. Well, we wouldn't exclude you from that trial. We just mark it as adjacent so that you know it's something you can grow into. And so we have this category called adjacent match. The third category is a near match with missing information. So it looks like everything we know about you matches what the trial is looking for, but there's something that the trial is looking for that we don't know about you. And so when that happens, we flag it. We actually show the specific information. For instance, we need to know if you have hepatitis or something like that. And then with that information, you could potentially qualify for the trial. And then the last category means you have a B and a C in your match. Means that there's something that could change and there's something that's missing. And so those are, that's another possible option, just missing information. All right, next slide. We then organized your report, and Stacy and Melinda, this is new since we last talked. We organized the report around trial groups. And so this first group, I call the straight A's. These are immediate shots on goal. So it means that you're a match type A from the last screen that we just looked at. That trial is actively recruiting overall, and the sites near you are also actively recruiting. So that's an obvious straight shot on goal. You can go for it right now. The group 2 matches are things that are BC or BC, where the trial and the site are active. So maybe you already know, oh, I don't have hepatitis, so I can go apply for that trial right now. Well, that's cool. So that's just as good as a group 1 match. It's just something that we didn't know about you. All right. And then the third group could be any match type, and the trial is recruiting overall, but the site near you is inactive or there isn't a site near you. And if that's the case, then there's a possible reactivation of a site that's closed near you. And then finally, there's a group of trials that are inactive. Maybe they're terminated, on hold, something like that. But that doesn't mean, or maybe they're just in process and they're just waiting for an endpoint. Well, in those circumstances, quite often, treatments are available through expanded access. So we don't leave those closed trials off your report. It might seem counterintuitive to put a closed trial on a trial options report, but I think it's important for you to know about that trial if you've heard of that treatment and it might be available to you through expanded access, which means there's an FDA pathway for you to get that drug before it becomes approved. And that's free access from the drug company, so you need to know about it. All right, so those are the 4 groups. We organized the report around those match types and group types to make it really easy for you to find what to go after first.
All right, real quick, I want to interrupt because an important question came through is, what does this cost the patient?
Nothing.
All the services from Ciitizen are free to the patient. That was one of the criteria that was very important to CCF, and that, yes, everything is free to the patient. Just want to emphasize that, and then we will get back to the other Q&A or to the other questions.
All right, cool. Let's go to the next slide. I think I'm done. Sophia, you want to take it away?
Sure. So now that you've heard Martin, our subject matter expert and clinical trials guru, explain to you just how this powerful technology works, I'm going to now shift a little bit and talk to you about how you access this amazing technology. And we're going to start with UptoDate Records, because like any system, it's only as good as what you put in. The quality of your clinical trial options report is entirely based on how complete your medical records are in your citizen profile and how up to date they are. If we're generating a clinical trial report on data that is from last October, chances are that what we generate for you is pretty useless because things will have changed in your care and isn't reflective of options that are actually available to you today. So before everyone goes and receives a clinical trial report, the first very, very important step is making sure that your records are completely up to date in your citizen profile. And so when we talk about being complete, I always love highlighting that on average, CCF patients are seen at 5 different health systems. So if you maybe only have 1 or 2 of your health systems in your citizen profile, it's important that you request records from everywhere you have been seen so we have that comprehensive data for you. And then the second is making sure that they're up to date. So we may have all of your facilities, but the last time we refreshed your records was in June. Well, patients are often seen much more frequently than that. And so I'm going to show you in a second how to refresh your records, but I want everyone to understand and appreciate that it doesn't matter how fancy and incredible the technology is we've built if the inputs aren't actually reflective of your situation today. And so the importance of having those records up to date. If you're new to Ciitizen, you can visit ciitizen.com/CCF and sign up. It takes about 5 minutes. All you need is your picture ID. We've walked through on previous webinars how to sign up kind of step by step. If you ever have any issues signing up, Mikkel, who leads our patient support team, myself, members of our team are happy to connect with you one-on-one to walk through it, answer any questions, but make sure that you fully sign up and have your profile. So now I want to dive into how you actually request your clinical trial matching report. Let's get to the good stuff. Hopefully a bunch of you are itching to request your report. So we're going to walk through exactly how to do that right now. And Rick, I believe you have the link I'm about to show on the screen handy. If you wouldn't mind popping that into the chat. So if you want to follow along and request your clinical trial report while we're meeting, go ahead. If you don't have a citizen profile yet, you can still request your clinical trial report. After this webinar, you'll get an email confirming that we've received your request and also inviting you to create your citizen account to get started. So go ahead and follow along. Rick, are we good? Link has been shared.
Yep.
Real quick, Sophia, I think there might be some relevant questions before we move forward. Is the interface ongoing? Is it an actual interface? Is it a live platform? We're looking at integrating 3 separate instances of Epic, Mercy Med, Group, Baptist Health, KY, Vanderbilt to have up-to-date data.
That was a big question. I'm not 100% sure I understand. Your clinical trial report will be accessible through the citizen profile soon. We didn't want to wait to bring this technology to you on our product being ready in terms of like the interface. And so we're going to get a bit ahead of ourselves.
I think what they're asking is that they're gathering medical records from several different institutions. And so they want to know, is it ongoing? Is it, updating as those records come in, that kind of thing. I believe Natalie, let me know if that's correct or not.
Or on a related note, and a question we get often, so I can presume it might be this question. We don't automatically re-request records. We used to, and the reason that we don't is because, like we said, on average, a CCF patient is seen at 5 hospitals. What was happening is every 3 months, we were automatically resubmitting forms, and a majority of them were coming back empty, because you haven't seen Memorial Sloan Kettering in 3 years since you got a second opinion, or the academic medical center isn't where you actually get all your labs and scans. And so we ask patients to tell us where they're actively receiving care so that we can just refresh those and not the ones that they've been seen previously. Practically, we were getting a lot of upset hospitals because we were submitting empty record requests. And then, it's a collaborative effort with everyone. We want to make sure that we're building our platform in a way that everyone is excited to participate and best support you all as patients. And so that's why that shifted. I'll show screenshots in a second of how to refresh, and that might also answer some questions.
Sounds good.
I just say it's Natalie, that's a very simple process. It's a button click and tell them which hospital or institution you've been seen at, and then they will submit the records and get the records refreshed for you. Very simple.
Yeah, you're filling out no forms, you're sending no faxes. If you even have a fax machine, we do that all for you. Alrighty, so we're going to step through a couple of quick steps here to request your form. This is what the survey looks like. I believe it's 6 questions, should take you a minute. We'll ask you, actually, I'm going to go back 1 second. We're going to ask you 2 important questions when you request your report. One is your location preferences. And so Martin earlier highlighted kind of how we help prioritize enrolling sites based on where you live or where you're able to travel. And so we give you the option of both listing your zip code where you are now and also 2 additional location preferences. For example, I may live in San Francisco, but I'm currently near Seattle staying with my grandmother. So I might put Seattle and San Francisco as places that would be viable places for me to enroll in a clinical trial. And then the second is we ask kind of where you are in your care, if you're actively making treatment decisions, if you're on treatment and curious about your options in the future, which helps us make sure that we're prioritizing the patients who are actively looking for treatment. Okay. Let's talk about updating those records. It's the kind of unsexy back-end work, but it's what powers your citizen profile and these reports. So it's important that we touch base on it. So when you log into your citizen profile, you can do that off of our joint landing page with CCF. It's app.ciitizen.com if you want to go there directly. You click into any of the facilities that you have records from, and there's a button here that says, have you been back since, and I cut it off, August 25th, 2020. And if you have, and there's additional records you would like to refresh, you hit yes, update my records. A pop-up comes up and you just hit, you specify if you've had imaging or just visited so that we know to request both radiology and medical records, and then you hit confirm and we take it from there. Once we receive your refreshed records, you receive an email notification letting you know, and you can always check the status of your request right in that same screen, the ID and the status against it. So that's how you update your records. As Stacy said, it takes 20 seconds. It's really quite straightforward. And as a reminder, you can always access Ciitizen from your mobile phone. I work with some patients who are like, yep, the second I walk out of my doctor, I just log on to my Ciitizen profile and refresh my records before I even leave the hospital. That way I don't forget. The other type of up-to-date records we talked about is completeness. So if there's additional providers you've been seen, the way that you can make additional requests is you hit that Get Records button. You specify where you've received care. Again, if you want us to make radiology requests or just medical records, and then you hit confirm. Once you sign up, you don't have to upload a picture of your driver's license or a signature. We keep that all on file, and so it's actually much simpler to request records from additional facilities once you've signed up for Ciitizen. All right, and then step 3, you're going to receive updates from us every step of the way. So when your updated records are received and available in your profile, we'll email you and let you know. When your cancer summary has been published and updated based on those updated records, we will send you an email and let you know. And then finally, when your clinical trial report is ready, it'll be emailed directly to you. at any time, if you want a status update, if you're curious where things stand, you can always reach out to us at support@ciitizen.com, me personally, or we have a neat chat bot on our website where you can direct chat with Mikkel directly. So lots of ways to get in touch with us if you're ever curious. We don't want you to ever be in the dark. And then, yes, step 4 is you get that emailed copy of your custom clinical trial matching report. The thing to know that Martin mentioned earlier is that we can refresh this report at any time, both because our library of clinical trials has been updated or because you have new records. And so this isn't a once and done, wait and get your report once. You can request your report and refresh your records as many times as you would like.
Could I just add one thing to that, Sophia, because Martin gave a lot of information on the matching criteria, but I just wanted to basically tell the patients that it's simply a color-coded list that you're going to receive, and the best matches for you at the top, and they just and then they just go down. So you're just going to start at the top and move all the way down. Those are your best options at the top. It's that simple. It's not complicated. Very simple list for you to look at and consider with your provider.
All right, and there's a couple questions I think we should try to answer. Fred wants to know, your survey limits a preference of 2 clinical trial locations. What if you're opening to traveling anywhere?
Hi, Fred.
I'll jump on that.
Martin, you want to answer?
Happy to, yeah. So this is a really challenging question. And the reason is that investigators are skeptical when they see a patient who says they'll go anywhere. So we never say that. And the reason is that they want to know that a patient has a support network where their trial site is, meaning there's a close friend or a family member that you could stay with for long periods or frequently, so that you can be there when the study needs you. And sorry, was there?
Yeah, sorry, Martin. I was just going to throw out that this group of patients, there's patients who have moved to a different city just in order to be able to participate in a clinical trial. So I do think it's super important. Yeah, I mean, we want to know where all the options are, but of course, we'd most definitely love to have the ones that are closest to us first.
Yeah, and so the way we manage that right now is we ask for specific cities that you could go to and think about those things. Where could you stay? And of course, your life is on the line. You'll do anything. And so I know patients truly are flexible. That's why the reports include all the trials, not just the ones that match your location preferences. If you see a trial that is on the report that doesn't match your location preferences, you could always just let us know, and we can look at what the other site, what are the other sites are available to you, or that information is available on clinicaltrials.gov. And so the reason to start with 2 cities, and by the way, there's no limit in the platform. Like if you gave me 7, I would just enter all 7 of them. That's not the issue. It's just the response of I'll go anywhere is one that's it's been problematic when I've done this before. That you wind up with matches that patients ultimately aren't able to participate in.
So Martin, if they had specific cities that they wanted to have a look at, you could create a report for them so they could look at everything, or they could just contact Ciitizen and get whatever.
Yeah, it's literally, there's nothing stopping me from entering more cities. The field is there. I just type more in.
Okay.
Melinda, are there other questions?
There are. We've got quite a few. Do you want me to go through a few more? I know there's some more slides left. So
really, we're gonna jump ahead. I mean, I know we're running short on time. I would rather answer as many questions so people feel informed and confident requesting these reports, and then we can keep this conversation going. I'm also happy to go past the hour. I don't know if.
Yeah, let's for sure get to the questions. Okay.
And
so I'm going to go back.
Sharing, just so everyone can see.
And the questions are really helpful. We appreciate them a lot because it'll make the next time we do this even better.
Okay. So Elizabeth asked, if you have 2 mutations, how do you know which is better for you or which you should pursue first? I'm going to just jump in there and say that's something you definitely need to discuss with your doctor. I think both of those options, both mutation options should come up in the clinical trial finder, and then that's up to you and your doctor to discuss which route to go first. If anyone else wants to add to that, go ahead.
We are not clinicians or offering medical advice, so I want to make sure that that disclaimer is very clear. And there is a leaf blower outside. I'm sorry. No medical advice, and we're here to create a tool and a resource for you to have that conversation with your doctor.
Okay. Is there a preferred or best time to look for participate in a clinical trial? For example, should a patient go through several rounds of chemo first, or should a patient begin looking immediately after diagnosis? I'm going to jump in on that one too. Sorry. No, immediately after diagnosis. And right now, I'll tell you why that's so important, because in cholangiocarcinoma right now, there are several first-line clinical trials, which means a trial that's specified for the first therapy you do after diagnosis. And so I would say definitely begin looking immediately after diagnosis, see what your options are, but then don't stop there, because there's also second-line clinical trials available after, even if you've already started treatment. Go ahead, Martin, jump in.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
And also, I think, Melinda, you need to point out too that sometimes, right, a first-line trial, you can't try it if you do something else first. That's the whole point.
Correct.
First line means it's
Yes.
the first thing that you're going to do after diagnosis. So you just want to take a careful look at the landscape, and that's why this is so helpful with Ciitizen to have this information.
And the majority of the first-line clinical trials for cholangiocarcinoma right now are phase 3 trials. So they're being compared against the standard care of gemcitabine cisplatin, which you would most likely be put on for your first treatment anyway. So it's so important to be able to participate in a clinical trial so we can further that research and find out if there's a better standard of care.
Can you explain that, Melinda? Because I want the patients to put those two things together. So there's a couple of things that Melinda has said, and we just need to put them together. And Martin touched on this as well, is that one of a great reason to be on a clinical trial is you really get the best care. They are so carefully, they're watching you very carefully. You really get great care, but also that if you go on the standard of treatment, that's what you're going into. That's one of the options in a clinical trial anyway. So you can participate even if you're on the standard of care. It's important.
Right.
And if that standard of care doesn't work for you, quite often, even especially in cholangiocarcinoma trials, there's one that comes to mind. There are crossover arms, meaning that you can get the experimental treatment once you've progressed on the standard of care treatment.
Yes, absolutely. We definitely advocate for crossover in our clinical trials, and very happy to say that there's not a lot of placebo options, which we don't like as cancer patients. And if there is, it's usually in conjunction with the standard of care, and hopefully after a certain time frame, you'll have the ability to cross over and get the new drug that's out there. Okay, Jeremy says, once a trial is found matched, what is the time lapse before patients can participate? That depends on your doctor, your ability to enroll, and all the pre-screening that kind of goes along with the clinical trial enrollment process. I think it can vary. I mean, I think it can be timely, somewhere between a week to 4 weeks, depending on if you have to have another biopsy to confirm diagnosis or to confirm a mutation. It could take a little bit longer. So I think it's going to vary trial to trial. If anyone has anything else to jump in on that, go ahead.
Something we see is that having access to all your medical records in your Ciitizen profile, it's very easy to share it with that clinical trial coordinator or the PI, which means that you might not have to repeat scans. It means you don't have to chase these records down and send them to the PI. And so your Ciitizen profile, beyond powering your clinical trial report, might also make it really easy for you to go from, I'm eligible, I want to participate, to actually being able to receive the treatment, because you can accelerate that pre-screening process. And in a pandemic with COVID, I think we're seeing that more acutely, and the role of having all your medical records in one place just becomes even more valuable.
Yes. Okay, Fred says, one challenge I've had with records is there can be multiple individual but related organizations, for example, Emory University Midtown, Emory Johns Creek, Emory Clinic. Looking at my existing profile, it appears some things are missing, probably because I haven't specified each exact name. Any hints of how best to address this?
Yeah, I'll answer quickly, Fred, and say, I'm happy to work with you directly to sort that out, because we definitely want to make sure we have all your records. This is often an issue with health systems that have merged or who have really complicated lines, because they themselves aren't well organized. They often have a central record office, and then they're the ones who are reaching out to all the auxiliary clinics, but unfortunately it's not always perfect. So if you ever see records that are missing, please flag it to us, because we can escalate that case on your behalf, and we can do the chasing and the phone calls and the interface with Emory. Truthfully, we've become really good at it, and patients don't have time to sit on hold. So let us do what we're really good at. Just make sure that you flag it. Works really well if you just email support@ciitizen.com, and then we'll get on your case right away. Yeah, it's unfortunately a limitation.
All right, so this is a question we get asked a lot. What about patients living abroad? My mother was recently diagnosed and they live in Greece. Are there possibilities for trials there?
I exhale, because I cannot wait until the day where Ciitizen is a global platform. Right now, we are limited to supporting patients who have received care in the US, and the trials we are matching against are only located in the US. This is a combination of privacy security regulations, with Europe and GDPR having different stringencies on the platform, but also we don't have the same legal regulation to go get your records. So in the United States, we leverage HIPAA right of access. We wouldn't be able to go get your mother's records in Greece, and so it also limits our ability to serve her effectively. That said, our Chief Regulatory Officer, Devin DeGraw, is the best possible woman for the job, and she's been hard at work kind of getting ahead of that question and laying the groundwork so that hopefully later next year, we can start supporting internationally as well. And
I'm going to just throw out
enough.
I am more than happy to help the international patients search for clinical trials, and we have a few other trusted partners that can help with that as well. So please email me at melinda.bachini@cholangiocarcinoma.org, and we'll put that in the chat box for you guys as well, but I'm happy to help with that. Sorry, my home phone's ringing. Okay, another question. Are CT, PET, MRI scans necessary, or are reports just as good? Just didn't know how AI would access the scans.
That's related to the question I just answered around pre-screening. Often, to fully evaluate your eligibility in a clinical trial, they're going to want to see the PET scan itself. They're going to want to see the MRI. So there's value in that. But also for you as a patient, you can view all of your scans on the Ciitizen platform. There's a full radiology viewer. And so we get both your reports, but also the DICOM images, the MRI files, the PET scan files themselves as well.
Just to add to that, it's not a gating factor for trial matching. So we use the report based on that exam to do the trial matching, for instance, tumor size and location and so on. So if you don't have those files, don't think that your matching process will be held up by it.
That's a good point.
Okay. Are there any tests, treatments, or flu shots, etc., to avoid because they might cause denial of trial availability? That's a hard one too, and that's something you definitely have to talk with your physician about. Tests, I don't know. Treatments sometimes exclude you, and but that would be part of your medical record, and that would also be reported in your trial finder. That you wouldn't be eligible for this trial based on you've received whatever treatment that would exclude you, if that makes sense. every clinical trial has inclusion-exclusion criteria, but the good news is that they're matching you for that. So I hope I answered that. Anything
Martin,
else you guys want to add?
Martin, are there many clinical trials that exclude patients because they've gotten a seasonal flu shot? Is that
So just to answer the question, there's been you've actually been a part of this. There's a lot of awareness in the clinical trial community about selection parameters that are kind of unfair and unrealistic. And those are getting wiped out of clinical trials. For instance, increasingly trials will even take people who are HIV positive. That wasn't the case a couple of years ago. And so the general shift in things is to make trials more accessible to a population that resembles the real population. With that said, I've personally read thousands of clinical trial protocols, and I've only seen one that said, vaccinations just broadly. And I think even in that case, they might have meant something else than a seasonal flu shot. And in the times we live in, I'm not a medical provider, but get your shot. Like, geez.
I just got mine yesterday.
Good.
Okay. Do insurance companies ever deny the costs associated with clinical trials? How do the financials work when participating in a clinical trial, i.e. cost of CT scans, MRIs, infusions, etc.? That is a great question, Joseph. And each clinical trial is different. And I always tell every patient to ask the sponsor of that trial what expenses are being covered, because it's not always easily provided to the patient, and sometimes they will cover different expenses, but most people's insurance will cover the standard of care clinical trial costs that go along with participating in a clinical trial. That includes the scans, the MRIs, the blood draws, and all that information. Thankfully, that is something that has been approved upon since the first time I tried to enter into that clinical trial, and so those costs should be covered in there. Did I miss anything on that?
No, I would just say that if you're going into a clinical trial, you should ask what's covered, because a lot of times these companies will cover travel, they'll cover other expenses that you may not be aware of, but your doctor has to ask them to cover that. So you need to ask your treating physician what kinds of additional expenses they would cover.
Exactly.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I just, I hate to loop back, but I have to. I want to let you know that one that I saw that was, broadly, excluding vaccines, I ignored that criteria. Like, you won't get excluded by Ciitizen because of a dumb criteria.
Good to know.
All right.
Okay. If we are aware of new treatment technology that might be a good match for treating CC, but the researchers don't have trials planned for CC, what can patients do to influence the researchers to consider working on CC? What dictates their cancer selection process? Fred, that is a wonderful question. And Stacy?
Yeah. Fred, send me your information, and we'll talk with the Research Network members about it. We are talking with companies every single day about new things that we're seeing come up on clinicaltrials.gov, things that we're seeing published in financial things, any adjacent work that's being done. We're always looking, we're always reaching out to these companies and saying, hey, have you considered cholangiocarcinoma, and let us introduce you to this, what's going on and how it could be helpful. So we're always looking for news. So just send that to me, Stacy at cholangiocarcinoma.org, and I'm happy to take a look.
This is a good moment for me to CCF's horn, because they never do it for themselves. The advocacy work that this organization is doing on behalf of all patients is truly top-notch. You have an incredible, incredible team fighting for you and greater access and treatment options day in, day out. The fact there are 147 trials that are open to cholangiocarcinoma patients is a direct result of the incredible advocacy work that CCF has done for many, many years. And so it is a pleasure to be a part of this community and to work with their team, because they really are the best in the game. And we can't think of a better group to get to launch this novel technology with. So, Stacey,
we are super happy.
Your whole team's amazing.
Thank you, Sophia. We appreciate that. I do want to ask these last two poll questions if we can. I know we're a little bit behind, but Rick, if we can do number 6 and 7, that would be awesome. Before today, did you know where to search for a clinical trial? And then if you guys have more questions that come up later, please don't hesitate to email me and I will get them to Sophia and Martin. We'll get them answered for you for sure. 70% said yes, 30% said no. Okay, last question. Do you feel better prepared to explore your clinical trial options with this new tool?
Let's do another 5 seconds. 5, 4.
Yay! 100% said yes. That makes me very happy. All right, Sophia, Martin, I'll let you close us out.
Well, we would accept nothing less. If it was 95%, we would just grind it out until we got to 100%. This call would last, longer. So good answer.
Thank you, everyone. We look forward to receiving your clinical trial report requests. If you have any questions, reach out to the CCF team, to us. I'll put Martin and my email in the chat here shortly, but we're just so excited for today. We've been working on it for a really long time and just can't wait to get these reports in your hands. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Sophia. We appreciate the work you're doing on behalf of our patients. And this will be recorded and up on the website shortly if you guys need to go back to look at it. And please don't hesitate to reach out to us for anything. Have a great day.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.